Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
Well, after a couple weeks of fairly heady movies that were a little bit deep and a little depressing and serious, we decided to get to something totally goofy and fun, something we knew would be totally goofy and fun. So this week what we are doing is 1989's Witchtrap, which is not to be confused with Witchboard. It is definitely not a sequel to Witchboard, which it tells you in the very, very beginning, before the title credits, and is plastered all over the VHS box art. Even though Witchtrap and Witchboard are written and directed by the same guy, Kevin S. Tenney. Also happens to star a bad, evil spirit with a big beard and hair that terrorizes people and doesn't really pop into play until the very end of the movie. Played also by the same guy. Actually, most of the people in this movie were also in Witchboard. So I guess we just had to make that clear in case you didn't know. But the similarities between the two movies are huge. And we love Kevin S. Tenney. We've done a couple of his other movies. We really did enjoy Witchboard, as I recall. And we're big fans of Night of the Demons. At least Night of the Demons is just one of the most iconic horror movies of the late 80s in its corniness, cheesiness, and just overall fun and effects. Mm-hmm. So, this movie came out, I believe, the year before Night of the Demons and 2 years after Witchboard. And then a sequel to Witchboard came out later, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, these are the movies Kevin Tenney is most famous for, even though he was making stuff up into the 2000s. And apparently he had to step in for a character in this movie as well and put on what has to be one of the most excellent acting debuts of all time. Oh, my God. I'm pretty sure I've never seen this movie before, actually. Although the box art always attracted me in the video store, certainly hadn't seen it. And I think I actually had confused it with Witchboard because actually the box art, if you're trying to make your movie not be confused with another movie, don't make the box art look almost exactly the same.
Right.
And then don't put on the box art for your other movie, this time it's not a game. Well, I don't know. I mean, taken on its own, Witchtrap apparently was never a game in the first place, but if you compare it to Witchboard, which is referring to a Ouija board, then I guess he's trying to say this time it's not a game because it's not a sequel to Witchboard. So anyway, boy, this was quite a fun movie to watch, and I'm looking forward to chatting about it, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time I'd watched it. How about you, Craig?
It's funny that you say you're pretty sure you hadn't seen it before, because I feel the same way. I'm not really sure. I didn't think I had, and then watching it, I don't know. I may have, but frankly, it's not particularly memorable. So If I had seen it before, I'm not really surprised that I don't remember much, if anything, about it. I don't know. The only thing that I really knew about it was that it was made by the same folks as the people who made Witchboard, which again was a positive in my book because I am a fan of Witchboard. But like you said, they go out of their way to let us know it is certainly not a sequel, and it's not, though like you said, they are strikingly similar in many ways. But I think that Witchboard, while certainly no masterpiece, is far superior. This movie, gosh, I'm not really sure what to say about it. The thing that struck me most, well, there are a lot of things. One, I think it has some of the worst, cringiest dialogue I've ever seen in a movie.
Oh, God.
I mean, obviously, I know who wrote it, but in my head, I kept thinking, who wrote this? Like, these lines are so stupid and nobody would ever say these things. Secondly, the acting is pretty darn bad across the board.
Everybody. There's not a good actor in this whole movie.
No, it's pretty terrible, which is compounded by the fact that somehow they screwed up the audio. They recorded the audio live as they filmed, but somehow it got screwed up. So they had to go back and redub all the dialogue, which is painfully obvious and really only highlights how bad the acting is anyway. So Yeah.
Yeah.
Good start.
I have to say that too. The acting is wooden. I mean, this is the best example of what I would call the most wooden acting you've ever seen. Like, the faces barely change expression, and it seems like the actors are not really aware of the content of their lines as the lines are coming out of their mouths.
Right.
I was trying to chalk that up to maybe bad ADR work. Like, maybe in the moment, their delivery was so much better, but then when they got behind a microphone in a room, it became more wooden, but I don't think so. I just don't think anybody was able to carry it. And also, I didn't at first notice that the dialogue was not quite matching up with their lips, because for having to do the whole movie and for being a low-budget production as it is, it's probably better than I would ever do, trying to match dialogue to lips. But the problem is that uncanny valley area, it's just enough off that it's almost distracting through the entire movie, as opposed to the Italian movies that we watch, where they're kind of so far off that you get used to it and you don't even care.
Right.
It was annoying. But yeah, that's the least of this film's problems. I thought that the dialogue, there were moments in which I thought, this dialogue probably sounded extremely clever on paper, because it is filled to the brim with what are supposed to be jokes. But the jokes are corny as hell. And maybe if they were delivered in a more natural way, at least half of them would have come off. But because the acting behind it is just so wooden, none of it comes off. And some of it's really cringy. Like, there are racist jokes in there and weird stuff that people are saying to each other. Like, people don't talk like this.
No, right. And that's the thing. Like, I felt like they were supposed to be jokes too, but they fell so flat. Like, you say maybe if they had been delivered more naturally, I almost feel like they needed to ham it up a little bit more. Like, I almost felt like they were taking themselves very seriously, delivering these silly lines. And this has happened several times with movies that we've watched. I found myself thinking, was this supposed to be a horror comedy?
Right.
Because they were, especially with the main character, Tony, who is this detective, like, pretty much everything he says is a quip, but he delivers it with a straight face, and it just falls completely flat. Like, I wanted to laugh at it or with it, but in the context, it's just really not funny. Like, I really didn't laugh out loud at all.
No.
I recognized that the things that they were saying were ridiculous, but it seems so written.
Yeah.
Like, at one point, Tony calls people a bunch of chuckleheads, and he refers to another guy as a walking hard-on with feet. Like, nobody says that. Like, nobody says any of these things.
Especially some of the dialogue between the cops, which I think is supposed to sound like hard-edged ribbing, but also the the one cop, his name is Tony Vincenti, and he's got a partner named Levi who's African American, and that needs to be said because it's pointed out multiple times in the movie when people make black jokes that are really stretching the boundaries of taste, even in the 80s, I think. And then their boss is Murphy, and this is like a private detective firm, and Tony, apparently, we hear later on in the film, was the best of the best, apparently, out of the police academy, was a great detective on the LA force, but had some trouble with a particular case, and now he's been hired by this guy instead, and he's out of the force. So
yeah, supposedly, like, he's this great detective, but he's such a wise guy that they kicked him off the force. Right.
Yeah. This guy, you could have kept him on the force. You just would have wanted him, like, cleaning the bathrooms and stuff.
Well, he's deliberately difficult. Like, he's just crusty to everybody. Like, he doesn't like anybody. He thinks everybody's stupid. He's just got, like, a huge chip on his shoulder, and he's supposed to be the hero of the movie. which he is, I guess, but he's not likable, which is unfortunate because he's played by a guy named James Quinn, who I really don't know from anything else except Witchboard, and he was my favorite character in Witchboard.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, he was the funny, chummy friend of the main guy who got killed. And in that movie, when he got killed, I was bummed because he was my favorite character and he got killed off really early. And he was just really likable and endearing in that movie. And then here, it's just totally different. I get it. He's playing two different characters, so I get it. But I don't know.
He might be a little out of his league with this one, I'm afraid.
Well, I just think it's bad. I just think it's badly written, and like, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do with this?
I suppose that we should mention the premise, right?
Yeah, why not?
the premise of the movie is that there's this old house, and that's where it opens up, and the style of shooting in the opening scene is so similar to Witchboard, with these like ghosty POV shots and weird like growling and noises kind of behind the shots. And there's this goofy looking guy in this house who's just immediately scared, and we don't know what he's scared of. But apparently he's so scared that he either jumps or is supernaturally pushed out of a second story window, and he falls out, then proceeds to bleed a pool of blood, like within
rapidly.
Like 3 seconds, so much blood comes gushing out of this guy. It was like he was a water balloon that popped. It was
That's true. He could have been swimming in it if he wasn't dead. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah. And during all of the POV shots in this house, as we're zooming around, we get a lot of this creepy imagery inside the house. Everything looks semi-satanic and old and weird, and there's a picture frame on the wall that inside of it, over the fireplace, is this guy who looks exactly like, what was his name from Witchboard?
Malfader.
Yeah. I mean, it's like they used the same makeup, and they did use the same guy.
He looks exactly the same.
Yeah, again, if you're trying not to make your movie a sequel to Witchboard, why in the world are you making so many similarities between them?
And honestly, I know you've already said it, but I just want to reiterate, like, if you are interested, if you've seen either of these movies, really, like, just go online and look up the box art. They are virtually identical, the box art for these two movies. The only difference, really, the only notable difference is that on the Witchtrap box art, there's a little tiny, like, Polaroid of Linnea Quigley, who is in this. And thank goodness, because she was pretty much the only part of it that I enjoyed.
I know, right? Well, once that happens, a guy named Felix gets a phone call, and he's basically like, oh, you're calling us in, okay. And he calls out to Agnes, which is his wife. Agnes and Felix were both also in Witchboard. And we get our first boob shots of the movie, which is actually pretty impressive. I wasn't expecting boobs, 4 minutes into the film, but Agnes, for no really good reason, is just laying in the tub when they get the call. And it turns out that Felix and Agnes must run this sort of go-to Ghostbusters outfit, more or less. Mm-hmm. She claims she's psychic, and Felix claims he's psychic, and then they have a couple other people along with them who are. Now, she kind of has to recruit the other woman. She has this conversation with a redhead named Whitney who's out jogging. And it's such an awkward scene where Whitney's out jogging in the park and suddenly Agnes comes out almost like she was behind a tree or something and just starts walking towards Whitney and running alongside her.
Whitney, you have a gift.
You mean a curse?
I mean a gift. And if you believe God gave it to you, you must believe He wants you to use it.
Ooh, that's a cheap shot, Agnes. Especially coming from you.
Why? Because I'm an atheist?
It scares me, you understand? I can't control it.
But I can.
I hope so. For everyone's sake.
And then she runs away. And then in the very next scene, she's there. Like, I guess she changed her mind. I have no idea.
It made no sense. Anyway, whatever. It didn't take a whole lot of convincing for Agnes to bring Whitney into this team, which apparently Whitney was a key element of this team, as it turns out, because her husband is a medium who can channel. What did he say?
He's a mental medium and she's a physical medium. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean.
It's like he can channel the speech or whatever of the ghost, and then the physical medium can the ghost can work through the physical medium to do physical stuff in the world or whatever. And then Agnes is just along for the ride, I guess, with their
videographer.
The videographer, Linnea Quigley. So super happy to see her in this movie. She wasn't in it nearly long enough, nor was she given enough lines.
No, and it's so sad because she is she's the only one with any kind of charisma.
Yes. Yes.
First, when she appears, and this, is par for the course for her career, but the first thing that you see of her is just the camera does this leering shot from her feet all the way up her backside. So that's hello, here's our sexy one. And she looks great in this movie, but she's really just there to kind of be the sex pot, which would be fine if she were given more to do, but she's not. She literally probably only has 3 lines in the movie, which is unfortunate. So there's that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So there's that group, and then the guy, Devin Lauder, who is played, as you said, by the director, and he should stick to directing for sure.
God.
He owns this house. He inherited it from an uncle or something, and I guess there was a clause in the will that he couldn't sell it and he couldn't tear it down. That's a weird clause, and he says so his only other option would be to allow the county to absorb it or whatever, which apparently they want to do because it's located right next to this cemetery, and they want, they would want to expand the cemetery or something. I don't know. He gives a whole big long spiel, but he says that the reason that he tried to rent it out in the past, but nobody's ever stayed for more than a couple of days because it's haunted by his uncle, and he knows because he's been there and he's seen it and he's experienced it. But he saw some news that these other bed and breakfasts were claiming to be haunted, and they were getting a lot of publicity and business. So he decided that he's already renovated it into a bed and breakfast. He wants to say that it's haunted to bring people in, but he doesn't want it to really be haunted because he sent in some guy, and this is the guy that we saw get killed, the amazing Asimov. What? I don't know why the amazing Asimov.
For publicity?
Yeah, publicity, I guess. I don't know. But he sent them in there and he died. So now he's brought this team in to exorcise the house. The stipulation is they have to take this group of cops with them for security, for liability reasons or whatever. And that's it. So even though the cops don't want to go and the people don't want the cops to go, it's all or nothing, and so they all end up going, and then we spend the rest of the movie in the house.
And Tony really doesn't want to go because there's a scene between Murphy and Tony that goes on way too long, and Murphy is like their boss.
And you've got to play some of this dialogue. It's so terrible.
You don't like the case?
No. This is not a case. This is a joke. Look, you want us to go up there and babysit this grade A group of chuckleheads while they sit around in a circle, hold hands, and talk to dead people.
What makes you so sure they're chuckleheads? Maybe this house really is haunted.
Yeah, and maybe your parents aren't really first cousins either, Murph, but I wouldn't lay odds on it, because see, if you're not a direct product of inbreeding, then there really is a God, and he's got a personal grudge against you.
It's supposed to be, and again, you see this in movies, like there are movies that do this well. Lethal Weapon, does this well, where you've got these two cops who kind of are supposed to hate each other, but deep down inside they have an affection for each other, but they still can't stand each other's guts, so they spend the whole time ribbing each other and right on each other's last nerve. It does not come across at all in this movie. It's just a series of really lame one-liners. These people spit at each other, and Murphy pretends to be upset by it, but none of this is convincing. In fact, you kind of wonder why Tony doesn't has such a problem going into this house? He thinks it's a joke. So, I don't know, why not just stay there a night and collect the paycheck? You know?
Right.
It's a little silly, the whole idea that there is this tension between them. It's just to add something to the movie. But
Your beer. It's as flat as my ex-wife's chest.
oh, God.
I know, it's awful.
Oh, man. So, anyway, so there's that. That's been established. They all show up at the house. It seems like Levi, which I've got to point out, pretty much every scene with Levi in it, at some point or another, ends up with some wisecracks towards him that are racial.
I love it when Murphy talks like a detective novel.
Yes, Sam Spade lives.
Never say spade to a brother.
Sorry, all the ghost talk must have me spooked.
Very funny.
And some of these are terrible. And I mean, he'll spit it back like,
I'm going to find that overgrown abortion and give him a .38 caliber enema.
You're going to do what I say. I'm going to kick your black ass down those stairs.
Try it and I'll tap dance across your face like Bojangles Robinson.
Uh-huh.
even that's just, all of it's just cringy. And it happens several times in this movie.
Even the introduction of the character, and you know, I don't want to be overly critical because I understand that it was a different time and we're much more sensitive about race and the portrayal of, you know, different races and cultures and whatnot, but just this guy's introduction, like, he comes in strutting down the hall like Shaft. Like, they may as well have just put him in like a floor-length fur coat and like a pimp hat. It feels so intentional. Like, here's our black guy. Like,
it's true. It's true.
It reads really poorly today.
Well, and also he ends up being the one who's leering all over Linnea Quigley, and I don't know. I mean, I guess it could have been any one of them, and I'm not saying that it was like, oh, let's make it the black guy, but that's also a little cringy when you kind of add everything together.
Yeah.
But anyway, when they show up at the house, you know, he's kind of hanging on her a little bit or hanging back with her, and she's like, hey, you know, I need some help getting some stuff from the van. He's like, oh, I'll go. They have a little, you know, back and forth.
I feel like as they're walking out the door, they bump into one of the final characters we meet, who is like the groundskeeper named Elwyn, and he's like this big oafish simpleton who is made out to be threatening and menacing from the beginning. And I thought, surely this is a mislead.
Right.
Like, surely Elwyn is not just going to be this oafish, you know, bad guy. But no, he is. It's just like the flattest characterization ever. Like, he's the groundskeeper, but also he was like the stage manager for the uncle who lived in the house, Uncle Avery, who was also like a psychic and an illusionist or something.
And a Satan worshiper, by the way.
And a Satan worshiper. And what happened apparently was they found his body. Okay, well, so there's like a satanic altar in the attic that they find right away. And apparently Avery's body was found draped over it, disemboweled, and his heart was missing. And Agnes tells the story, and she's like, I think that they caught him right in the middle of a satanic ritual where he was trying to make himself immortal, but he wasn't able to finish it, but they never found his heart. It's all so silly. Like, apparently through, you know, by them being there, it gives him the opportunity to, because there's a physical medium. Like, I'm literally sitting here rubbing my head because it's all so convoluted and stupid.
It is.
Because they're there, he can try again.
That's right. And Agnes and Whitney know way too much about this guy and what happened in this house. Like, they know stuff that you would just have to infer or guess about. They just found this guy murdered. Supposedly nobody knew what it was all about, but I don't know how these two know all of this detail. But maybe it's just because they're experts in the field, so they see things nobody else does.
Yeah, they immediately do what they call a sitting. I don't know why they call it that. It's a seance,
you sit
I guess.
down. You sit
right,
down.
You sit there and you know, look at each other or whatever. And Agnes leads it, and she's like, I'm talking to the spirit of Avery, whatever his name was, and I have a mental medium here and a physical medium here. And she says, you can speak to us through the mental medium, which he immediately does. The spirit just immediately enters Felix's body, and speaks to them in his ghosty voice. And this spirit is supposed to be really scary and dangerous and threatening, but when he talks through the guy, even though he's got kind of this menacing voice, it's almost like they caught him right after a nap. Like, oh, like, what are you doing here? We're here to talk to you. Oh, well, I'm gonna destroy your soul.
Who are you?
I am here to free you from this house.
I do not wish to be freed.
Then I will force you.
You are not strong enough.
I believe I am.
I will rise like the phoenix and destroy you. All of you.
And I love the way that Agnes puts it. Because she's doing it for us. She's saying, "Why we have a mental medium here who you can speak through, and then later you can, channel through our physical medium over here." And he goes, "Maybe later."
Right.
It's so funny.
It is funny. And before they had sat down, she had given Whitney this contraption. It looks like it's just a little black box with flashing lights on it.
It looks like an answering machine.
Kinda. And Whitney sits it on her lap, and they talk to the spirit. She says, "Show us your power through Whitney," and he's like, "Maybe later." And then Felix convulses, and as the spirit exits him, I suppose, and he's like, right after, he's like, "I sense something important in the basement." So they go down to the basement, and they're like looking around, and they're like, I wish I knew what I was looking for. And somebody says, "Well, we'll know it when we find it." And eventually Felix is like, "Here it is, I found it." And there's a pentagram. It's not even like a full pentagram, it's just a star on the wall. He's like, "This is important for some reason." And then they just leave that alone for a long time.
That was my favorite bit. It zooms in ominously on the star, and then, okay, next scene, we're all upstairs.
Yeah, it's important for us to know it's important for later, but we don't need to worry about it right now.
We got a lot more movie to go before we're going to come back to this. All right, folks? It's so crazy. So they do their exploring, and this is a bit I didn't understand either. When they're in the living room, when they first got in, Whitney, who, by the way, they cast this woman with these piercing kind of bright green eyes again, for this role. And at least for that, she was really good. And she was just on edge the whole time, right? You just felt like she was completely uncomfortable and freaked out by even being there. I don't know why she didn't leave the house days ago. I don't know why she sticks around. But anyway, she kind of flips out and she goes, "Oh, there's something behind those curtains over there." And the cop goes over there and he moves the curtain aside and says, "Yeah, the window's filthy back here." And they all look back at her and they're all like, "Oh." So I thought we were trying to establish that she's maybe a little unreliable, or that, I don't know what the point of that little episode was, because it was really played up. But she ends up being the person in this whole movie where this guy's channeling through. And anytime something happens in the house or to any of these characters, she just goes into these crazy convulsions to show that, he's channeling through her. So she goes upstairs with Tony, and that's where they find the altar, and that's where she gives more of the backstory. And they have this weird conversation about God and faith.
It's so, yes, and it's just too much. Like, I don't know, I was reading reviews or something somewhere, and one of the reviews said, like, all it's pandering about God and good and evil, and it doesn't fit in this movie. Like, this is a silly, dumb movie, and it's like they try to get philosophical for a while, and it just comes across as
Well,
you just want to let your jaw hang down and drool roll out of your mouth. Like, oh my God.
Well, they're clearly trying, to get this philosophical thing, which is not a theme that carries through. So you're right. It doesn't even thematically work in the movie. I mean, it's not just that it falls flat. It's like they don't even really commit to it. And then the second thing is that you get the sense that they're trying to establish some kind of relationship between these two characters. Like, for a little bit, Tony's a little exposed here, and he's actually willing to talk about his philosophy, which is angry. You know, he's just like, I've seen rapes, and I've seen murders, and I've seen, 12-year-old prostitutes on crack, and blah, 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 so there's clearly no God. And then she's basically, I feel sorry for you, but you're going to find out soon enough, the Satan and God are real, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's kind of the essence boiled down of what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. And then that crops up a little later in the movie, but it's not really significant. It's just another conversation they have. And you feel like they're working towards some kind of redemption for him, like
right.
He's finally going to believe, he's finally going to see things. And he kind of does, but he kind of doesn't. They were trying, but then they just didn't really bother to see that through, I think, as the movie went on.
It falls flat. I think you're right. I think that's what they were trying to do. I think that it was supposed to be revelatory for him at the end, and, good and evil do exist, but it just doesn't read. Like, I mean,
and with unconvincing characters, you're going to get... Everything else is kind of unconvincing too, right? So, so that probably that's it.
I had mentioned that box before. What's his name? Tony asks Agnes about it, and she's like, "Oh, it's an invention of mine." Basically, it's just it's a Ghostbusters ghost trap. Basically,
yeah.
Like, She gives this big explanation about how ghosts are literally the souls of people that haven't passed on, and with this contraption, somehow through Whitney and this contraption, she can trap the ghost in this little box and then take it out of the house. So, hence the title, Witchtrap. That's what her invention is.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's their goal, but once they have that initial seance, and then they kind of go off looking around for a little bit, Linnea Quigley, I just call her that, Ginger,
Ginger.
and Levi go out to the car for something, and I think my favorite line of the movie...
No, really. Even though you can't see them with the naked eye, sometimes the camera will pick them up and put them on tape.
Well, scratch my ass.
Not until I know you better.
And it's one of her only lines, and she says it so flirty, and I just love her.
She's great.
Then we kind of start getting into, I guess, the horror. Because like you said, Whitney is alone in her room and she starts convulsing. Meanwhile, Linnea Quigley is taking a shower because she's Linnea Quigley and she's in a movie, and that's what you do.
Yes. and once again, like Linnea Quigley in a movie, it's full frontal.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Head to toe, full frontal. And, we talked to her about that, and she's comfortable with nudity and good for her, and she looks great. And so she's in the shower. Whitney's convulsing on her bed, and the water goes off, and she's like, what the hell? And she's like poking at the shower head and looking up in it. And then just out of nowhere, in a split second, the shower head shoots out of the wall directly into her neck, like stabs her in the neck, and then pulls back in, and she's dead. And I was so bummed that she was the first to go. I mean, I guess it should have been predictable, but I would have so liked to have seen more of her. I think that she could have brought a lot more life and levity to the movie that was needed.
Yes. And I mean, this is one of the more creative kills I've seen in a movie. I don't think I've ever seen the shower head just sort of extend, like that pipe extends out of the wall and shoots into her neck and then pulls back. it's very supernatural because something like that could never actually happen. But then, later on when the girls are talking about her, well, they what's her name's convulsing, and so there's that. There's also 2 television screens downstairs because these video cameras that they set up for the sitting are still running. And so we see on these television screens a very ghostly Avery walking up towards his urn of ashes on the mantle of the fireplace. But then that ghost trap thing is next to it, so he cringes back in terror and walks away.
And he does that 2 or 3 times.
God, yes.
It's so dumb.
It took me a while to realize what was going on here, because later on those ashes disappear. And so I guess the ghost was trying to get the ashes, but that ghost trap being positioned where it was keeping him away from it. It wasn't until the movie was over that I put all that together. So that happens, but then once they kind of comfort Whitney, then they realize, where's Ginger? And then somebody says, oh, Ginger was upstairs taking a shower. And so they run upstairs, and the cops open the door and see her body in there, and run out. So they're arguing, what are they going to do?
And they think that Elwyn killed her because Levi had caught Elwyn peeping at one of the other ladies. So they think it was him. But the thing that bothered me about this scene was they find her dead, and this happens in horror movies, but it always bothers me. They
just leave her.
They just leave her there, and they're not particularly upset or concerned about it.
Yes. Yes. Well, even later, the 2 girls are discussing, and they're like, man, can you imagine? I mean, what happened to Ginger? How did she die? Do you really think that guy could have done it? I mean, he would just go in there and stab her? And the other girl's like, well, maybe he raped her before that. She's like, oh yeah, maybe he did rape her. What? This.
I know.
I mean, this is how bad the dialogue is in this movie. It's just laughable.
Well, and I know, and it's so silly. Whitney somehow, no, not Whitney, I keep getting them mixed up. Agnes somehow convinces them to stay, which is also stupid.
It's so convoluted. And it's all about making Murphy, what happens if I call and say that, the reason that she's dead is because the security was so bad on our thing. And Murphy's like, oh, well, we gonna let that happen. No, all right, we won't call anybody.
Right, so they send Levi for the police. I don't remember which happens first. When Levi goes, he drives out to the gate, but the gate is locked, and so he's standing in front of the gate, and then Whitney has another one of her seizures, and the car comes to life, and, first pins him against the gate and then backs up, and then he falls down and it runs him over and he's dead. But they don't know that, so they're all just still hanging out in the house. And at one point, Felix and Whitney are having a conversation, and I have to say that they are both just insufferable. They're absolutely awful. They're terrible, terrible actors, especially Rob Zapple, who plays Felix. I really want to believe, for his sake, that it was just so poorly written and directed that it wasn't a true reflection of his abilities, because if it was, whoo boy. But they have a conversation, and he's like, oh, when somebody dies, it makes it real. And she's like, well, people die all the time. And he's like, yeah, but it's different if it's somebody you know. And she's like, well, Felix, we barely knew her. We only worked with her one other time, so it's not like we really knew her anyway. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess.
This actually was the only moment in the movie when I did laugh out loud.
Why would Elwyn kill Ginger?
I don't know. She was naked in the shower. Maybe he raped her first.
Probably so. It seems so senseless.
Name me a killing that isn't senseless.
I suppose. But it has more of an impact when it's someone you know personally.
We didn't really know Ginger all that well, dear. We only worked with her that one time at the Stonedine Mansion.
Oh, God. So anyway, they do that, and then so there's the casual rape talk about Ginger and the long conversation about Agnes's motivations, like you said. And this is when we learn that Agnes is really hoping to get a book deal out of this, or really boost up her presence and their business or whatever. So she's like, if I can finally catch a ghost, then this is my biggest shot we've ever had. So that's why she's so obsessive about everybody staying and seeing this through. And then Whitney convulses again. This kill comes completely out of nowhere. It feels like it was just like, oh yeah, we got to do something about Murphy, so let's kill him off.
Yeah.
Whitney just starts, like, we switch from all these scenes which are interconnected to Whitney convulsing again and Murphy cleaning his gun, and a bullet rises out of a box of ammo and goes straight into Murphy's forehead and shoots him, which actually I thought was kind of a cool kill. Again, not something I think I've seen in any other movies, where just a bullet flies through the air, just propelled by a ghost. And this kill scene and also Levi's kill scene had to be cut short a little bit because the movie would have gotten an X rating. So we never actually see the car rolling over Levi's head, which is apparently a deleted scene. And we don't see like a close-up of Murphy's brains getting blown out. And the funny thing is, Murphy gets killed, and I don't think, does anybody ever discover the body or notice that Murphy is missing?
Yes, because Agnes walks in on Whitney having her seizure, and she's like, oh no, he got to you behind our backs. And he was working through you behind our backs, like when you were alone. He waited until you were alone, and then he got to you. And so they know that he could have done something, so then they go looking around and they find the dead guy. And Tony says, no, a ghost didn't kill him, he got shot. It must have been Elwyn. They just keep blaming everything on Elwyn.
Yeah.
And is that the point when Tony, like, runs? Now they're actually going to leave, right?
Yeah, but Tony goes to the basement. I think it's around the same time, isn't it? Maybe it's concurrent with this bullet in the head thing, where he's in the basement for some reason and he's looking around.
Yeah.
And a knife flies off the wall and pins him to a pillar just through his clothes. It doesn't actually hit him because I think it's at the moment that Agnes wakes up Whitney,
right?
That knife is kind of midair, so it's a little off. But then, for some reason, Elwood is actually down there in the basement too, and he attacks Tony again for no good reason, except he's like, "You guys are gonna get out of here. It's you're all gonna die." Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, he will rise again.
They have the worst fight scene. It's just like punch, 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 fall back, punch some more. It's really, I mean, it's not thrilling.
Yeah.
And then Elwyn kind of escapes, right? He just runs out the door or something?
Yeah. And so then when they decide to leave, and it's especially important that they get Whitney out of there, because she apparently is the key to this ritual. And without her, if she's removed from the equation, then the ghost is powerless. So it's important that she get out of there. So Tony goes to get the car, or the van, or whatever.
There's a van there for... Yeah, it's the van that they brought in.
They get Whitney out. Tony gets Whitney out somehow. I think that Elwyn shoots the van and blows it up, but somehow they get her out in the car, and they get the gate open, and he sends her off, and he also kills Elwyn. He has to shoot Elwyn like 15 times before the guy actually goes down.
Execution style in the head.
Oh, and what does he say? Oh, he holds the gun up to his head and says,
"Say goodnight, Gracie."
Like, oh, come on. That reference was dated even in the 80s.
Yeah.
Oh, and Felix got shot. Elwyn shot Felix. It's stupid. Like, Felix hears the van explode, and he comes out, and he's like, Tony, what's going on? And then he gets shot.
He gets shot.
And then while Tony's off getting Whitney out of there, Felix is like, I think we should do another sitting.
As he's bleeding.
Right. Oh, and another of my favorite lines is when they get back inside, when Tony gets the shot Felix back inside, Agnes says,
Felix, you're wounded.
Yeah, I know.
These are the lines. Oh my gosh.
But then comes something I was totally not expecting. They do their little sitting, and Agnes is like, all right, if you think we need to do a sitting, let's do a sitting. And Felix wakes up, and he channels immediately the bad guy. And the camera is close up on Felix's face, and then he goes, "Rrrr," and then his head explodes.
Yes.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
But that completely caught me off guard. I was not expecting that.
It was hilarious. I don't know. I don't remember. Agnes antagonized him about something. I don't remember
It's just
what
like,
it was.
at this point, the movie's completely off the rails. It's like they've broken their own rules. Like, this guy can make this dude's head explode? Where did that come from? It's not like Whitney was convulsing or anything at the time this was happening.
Right. Supposedly she's not even there. Like, and so she's driving down the highway and she sees the bad guy in the middle of the road and like she's gonna try to run him down even though he's a ghost. What? But instead, right before she is about to strike him, he disappears and there's a semi coming right at her. So she drives off the road.
No, but look at this. This doesn't even make sense. Why would he be trying to kill her? She's one of his keys to getting into the world and affecting the world. So why would he even be trying to get her into a head-on with the semi?
It makes even less sense when she arrives at the police station and she goes to run in the door and she actually, as she's running up to the police station, we return to Tony and Whitney at the house, and Tony goes to open a door, like, to the outside of the house, and Whitney comes running in, and she was like, "Oh my God, it was a trick. I never even left the grounds." Well, then what was all that nonsense on the highway about? Like,
yeah, I mean, it was a cool idea, but it was not executed well. So they're there, and for some reason, is it Agnes who says, we know, it was during when they're channeling the bad guy for the last time. She says to him, we know where your heart is. And I don't know at what point they figured that out. It's never really explained to us. But, I mean, we all knew. Duh, it's behind the pentagram in the basement.
right.
Like, it's the only mysterious part of this building you haven't checked out. So they're down there, and Agnes is like, we've got to get his heart. She says, we've got to prevent him from reuniting his heart with his body because that will bring him back to life or something. And the urn has gone missing with his ashes in it, which presumably the ghost has taken. So they have to find the heart and, I guess, destroy it or something.
Or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not really clear. They just know they need to get the heart so the ghost doesn't get the heart. And she has figured out at some point, which we don't really know, that the heart is behind this thing. So they get a little chisel out and they bang out the rock behind the pentagram. And sure enough, they pull out a box, with satanic signs all over it and a lock on it. It looks like the box out of Snow White, to be honest with you. It's kind of cute. And they pull that out and they just say, "Oh, his heart is in here." They don't open it up. They don't look in. I really wanted to see what a dead guy's heart would have looked like in this box, but we never get that opportunity. And then from here, Agnes, like, all hell breaks loose in the basement. I think Whitney goes into her convulsions again, and an axe flies through the air, goes right into Agnes's head, so Agnes is dead. And then that same axe starts flying through the air towards Tony. But they have that box down there, which they had brought down earlier.
Witchtrap.
The Witchtrap. And he holds it up, and suddenly it's like a cartoon. Like that axe goes, and stops, like floating in front of him, and drops down. And instead, I guess because the ghost got too close to the Witchtrap, it starts sucking it in with this effect of smoke going into this Witchtrap. So they set the Witchtrap down, but immediately Whitney says, I can sense that that's not going to hold him. He's really, really pissed off in there, and he's going to get out soon. We got to find a way to kill him for good. We have to get that urn, with his ashes in it. And they've been talking about finding this the whole time.
Yeah, and they're like, well, we don't know where it is. And Whitney's like, well, you're a detective. Figure it out. and so then he sits and thinks real hard. And he goes, if I were an urn full of ashes, where would I be? and then they look at each other and both say at the same time, the altar.
What? So they go up to the attic, to the altar, and I don't know, is she in like some kind of trance or something? They just walk
Not
toward
yet.
the altar like they know what
yeah,
the
but
fuck?
they get up there and they're like, oh, like the house is shaking and we can see the witch trap like shaking and smoking, and then they're like, oh, it's not here. And then the bad guy busts out of the witch trap, and then I think once he busts out, he possesses her, right?
That's it. Yep. He possesses her. He goes into her, and she walks towards the altar and pushes a little panel on the front where the pentagram is, and that falls open and reaches in and pulls out the urn and closes it up. And then she turns around and drinks the ashes down.
Yeah.
Which then, there's this really long scene where Tony's like, Whitney, are you okay? Whitney, are you okay? He's like walking slowly towards her while her back is entirely to him, motionless, not saying a word. And when he turns her around, of course, she is now this guy, the bad guy, Avery.
Physically, like she is turned into him.
And it's this same guy. It's the same guy that we've seen in the photographs. It's the same guy from Witchboard. And he's like, standing there in front of Tony.
Yeah, I mean, it's silly. It's, I guess, the final showdown. Tony shoots him a bunch of times. Of course, that doesn't work, I guess, because even though he's immortal now, so the bullets, I guess, just, like, they don't even have any physical effect on him at all. Like, they just go through him and hit whatever's behind him. And they fight for a while, and it's all very silly, and, like, the bad guy, like, holds him up in the air and is, I don't know, saying menacing things, whatever. But finally, I guess Tony breaks free, and I don't know, he says something stupid.
He just gets an epiphany, really, is all. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, and so he shoots the heart box. It starts to bleed, and the bad guy, Avery, starts to bleed also, and he shoots it several times, and eventually, somehow it ends up, doesn't it like fly out the window or something?
Yeah, I don't remember how. Does Tony throw it out the window or something? I'm not sure, actually, how that goes down.
I don't know, but it lands on the ground and explodes, and there's blood everywhere. And then Avery, like, burns / melts. And the effects here were pretty good, but they lingered on it way, way too long. Like, it went on for a really long time. And it was just melting wax off of some sort of form. But finally, when it's all melted away, all that's left is like a skeleton, and then these, woman hands that came from I don't know where reach up and pull the skull plates off Whitney's face, and it's Whitney underneath, and she's fine.
Yeah.
That's really the end, but then they do this stupid end cap.
It's so weird.
Tony. It's dumb.
What is it? I mean, what is this supposed to mean?
I think it's supposed to suggest that he now, like, runs his own PI firm, and people are calling him for paranormal jobs, but he's not interested in it. And then he has... Well, we see the bad guy, Avery, doing something, I don't know, just like approaching the camera or something, back at the house, and then Tony, like, wakes up with a start, like he was just dreaming that, and then that's the end. It cuts to black and the credits roll. I don't know.
So
it's a
weird.
really, really stupid end cap.
I don't know if they were trying to set it up with it for a sequel, or if this was just... Because as soon as the scene started, I'm like, oh, God, this movie's not done yet. Like, it should be done by now.
Right.
And he has that really long conversation with that woman on the phone telling us about how miserable he is now and about how naive people are, and ghost hunting's not all it's cracked up to be. And he hangs it up, and then he has that jump scare, and then he wakes up, and then there's a good 5 or 8 seconds of just him startled afterwards, staring off into space. Yeah, I don't know what it's supposed to mean. I really don't.
I don't know.
I mean, again, it wasn't like even if you were to look at this theme of him getting his redemption, learning about God and Satan, and it's all real, it doesn't even make sense in the context of that. He's just sitting there like super depressed.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. What a movie, right? It was interesting. I mean, this is the movie you make fun of. This is exactly the movie you make fun of. And it's a shame. It's so weird coming from this director. Like, I mean, I'm not saying he's the best director in the world, but Night of the Demons was a corny movie, but it was a fun movie.
Oh, super fun. Yeah.
Full of energy and effects and just off the wall. I mean, just a blast from beginning, and also a bit of a comedy, right? I mean, it knew what it was. It was so good. Witchboard, we laughed at that too, but it had heart and it was fun and the characters were interesting and
the acting was all right.
Yeah,
it was okay.
But this is like the complete opposite. It's just horrible. Every bit of it is just dumb. It's so
it's
stupid.
Really, really bad.
The writing is bad. The acting is bad. The film is so convoluted, and it's like, I don't know. It feels like a tax write-off movie that somebody had to throw together, and shoot in a week. It's just so dumb. So what a shame. But it was, again, it's the movie you make fun of. You get together with friends, you make fun of it. I think this is perfect for that. And on that level, just the sheer inanity of this film, it was enjoyable on that level for me.
Yeah.
I can't recommend it, but if you're in the mood for doing that, then I'd recommend it.
It's almost... I wish that it hadn't taken itself so seriously. I think if they had leaned into the corniness a little bit more, it would have been more fun. But, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for something stupid and mindless and really something to watch for the purpose of goofing on it, great. Otherwise, I would say skip it.
Exactly.
It's not a good movie. It's a bad movie, and I guess what I was trying to get at just a second ago was it's just not quite so bad it's good. It's just bad. I'm glad we watched it because I was looking forward to talking about how bad it is, but that's kind of the only reason that you would want to watch it. I think.
It's only redeeming quality. Somehow this movie made it out to the public and somehow is making money from people like us actually watching it again.
I guess.
Go figure. Well, thank you again for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. You can find our Facebook page. You can find our website. Just search Two Guys and a Chainsaw and leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of this movie and also give us some requests for films that you would like to see us review in the future. Until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.